Show. I'm your host, Eric Smith, and today I'm talking about Mayan Blue by Michelle Garza and Melissa Lason, I believe would be how you pronounce her name. This is from Sinister Grin Press. Just came out a few months ago, I believe, as of this recording. So, Mayan Blue. And what we have here is there's a guy, Professor Lipton, and he believes that the Mayans, at some point in their history, migrated north into what would eventually become the United States of America. More specifically, into Georgia. At least that's one place. And that's where he is, so that's where he's looking. So Professor Lipton is looking for evidence that the Mayans migrated into Georgia. While he's searching, his assistant or associate professor and 4 students are on their way to meet up with Professor Lipton and to help him. And I'll get into all their names later. But so while the assistant professor and the students are on their way, Professor Lipton's already there. He's searching and he finds a doorway with a seal. And it's a horror novel, so you know he's going to break the seal. And he opens a door between our world and the Mayan underworld, or Xibalba, I believe is how you would pronounce it, the land of fear. So this doorway's opened between the underworld and our world, and now we have to worry about our human characters. We're going to find out whether or not they can survive and whether or not they can seal up the doorway once again and protect the rest of the world. And that's basically it in a nutshell. So I'm going to start off with the things I didn't like about this book, because that's going to take, I think, a little less time than the things that I did like. We'll see. First of all, it's just a couple of things. There are places where, to me, the writing feels a little stilted. I believe this was a proof copy, so maybe things got smoothed over a little bit in the final copy, but some of it felt a little stilted, especially in the dialogue. To me, the dialogue did not flow naturally at all. A lot of it felt like characters saying things just so the reader would know those things. Basically, just expositional dialogue without any real flavor, without any natural flow to it. So you have that. And then the other thing that I really didn't like is I felt the characters were incredibly one-dimensional. We're introduced to each one of them. We learn basically what archetype they are, and that's it. There's really nothing to these characters. Professor Lipton, the sort of obsessed professor trying to find proof of his life's work, justification for how he has spent his life studying the Mayans, trying to find the proof. And that's basically all we have for this guy. He's a professor. He wants to find proof for his theory. So then you have the assistant professor. His name is Wes, and he's just the good-looking assistant professor. That's really all we know about him. Then we have Alyssa, and she is the sort of mousy, plain girl that has a crush on Wes, the assistant professor. And again, that's really all we know about her. Kelly is the blonde who's only interested in finding somebody rich to marry, and that's basically her character. She would like to be on a reality show too, if that's possible. So she wants money and fame. That's it. Then you have Tyler and Dennis, who are the rich yuppie jock characters. There is a point where it's said that they must be relatively smart because of the classes they're taking. I can't even remember if they're specifically in Professor Lipton's class. But we never actually see that from the characters. All we see is the 2 dumb jocks trying to get into the blonde's pants. They're both trying to get into Kelly's pants. Kelly's playing them, teasing both of them, trying to decide which one she may or may not want to hook up with, because they're both come from wealthy families, and that's all we get from the characters. There's no real development. There's no background. They're just very cookie cutter characters. So those are the two main issues that I have. The characters are very flat. The writing feels stilted at points. But once we get past that, what Michelle Garza and Melissa Lason have done here is they have created a pretty spectacular world in Xibalba. The Mayan stuff in this book is really wild. It's really fascinating. A lot of it is really terrifying. It could be more so if I cared about the characters. But again, the characters are so flat. You know, I'm on their side because they're the human characters, but that's as far as it goes. Um, I don't care about them for any more specific reason than that. They're just there, and we're supposed to care because they're the humans, and bad things are happening to them. We're not supposed to side with the monsters. Um, but uh, but so the Mayan world, the land of fear, very very cool. The creatures are very cool. You have the main bad guy, I guess, for lack of a better term, would be Apuk. Not even sure how you would say it, but he's the Mayan Lord of Death, and he sort of commands his. I shouldn't say sort of. He commands his army of creatures, and they're going out into the world, and they're uh, going after our characters. But you've got these sort of owl men guys, and you've got these other sort of lesser lords of death that have specific roles, and there's bloodthirsty creeping vines in Xibalba, and there are a few helpful creatures in the land that are gonna try to help our human characters. I don't want to say what everything is, but there are some pretty cool creatures. There's a lot of really interesting stuff, including that really cool cover. I like that. Too much reflection, but it's a really cool cover. So the story itself is really enjoyable. Um, I don't know a lot about Mayan history or Mayan mythology, so I liked going through here. I did look a few things up, um, to see if what I could find with a quick search of Mayan mythology, what I could find there, how well it matched up with what I'm reading in the book, and there are parallels. Some of the things I found um, weren't exact, but this is a work of fiction. I'm not reading, uh, a Mayan history here. So, but I find that fascinating. Different mythologies from different cultures have always fascinated me. So delving into this Mayan mythology and these monsters, really cool. Um, so that's the best part of this book, is the immersion in Mayan mythology, um, and the story works well. Where it starts out pretty typically with the seal being broken, the doorway opening, but once we get into what's going on, the meat of the story, and of course I don't want to give anything away, so I'm not going to talk about the meat of the story. But once we get into it, it is very compelling. Um, Despite again what I felt was stilted writing, um, I still was pulled through the story. It is compelling, and it's not difficult to read. Again, just some places felt a little stilted, but not in such a way that it was confusing or anything. Just less than smooth, I suppose. So, I suppose that's about all I'm going to say about this. Again, I don't want to give too much away. I don't want to tell you what happens to the characters, obviously. Um, but it is a really fascinating story. So, bearing in mind that I did have some problems with it, and unfortunately, anyone who knows me, watches my reviews, knows how important character is to me. And the lack of character development is kind of a big hit here. Um, it balances out because the story is really interesting. The Mayan culture, Mayan mythology, incredibly fascinating. The creatures, the monsters, incredibly fascinating. Excuse me. So it's kind of a balancing act as far as my rating. So what I ended up giving it was, or is, 3 out of 5 owls, owl heads, whatever you want to, however you want to describe that. But 3 out of 5. Um, I considered going a little lower, maybe 2.5 out of 5, right down the middle, simply because so disappointed in the lack of character. But it was outbalanced by how fascinating the story is and the creatures and a lot of the stuff that goes on. There's some crazy violence and gore. There's weird. I mean, this is they have built another world, essentially, the land of fear, Shabalba. So there is some nice world building going on and some very cool things within that world. So that bumped it up to a 3 out of 5. Um, but I'm not going any higher because just disappointed in the characters. And again, and the dialogue just really felt stilted. Some other things felt stilted, but the dialogue, to me, was completely expositional and did not flow. So there you have it. 3 out of 5 owl heads for Mayan Blue by Michelle Garza and Melissa Lason from Sinister Grin Press. Excuse me. So, if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put them in the comments below. As always, comments will be open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. So if you want more specifics on the story or have read it and have anything you want to talk about, just post a spoiler warning if you're going to give anything away. Please like, share, and subscribe. And that's it. So this has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith, and until next time, read more books.